Good evening, everybody, and welcome to the February ISM Rochester membership meeting. My name is Kathy Perna, and I am actually assisting with the virtual educational programs for the chapter. I would now like to introduce our chapter president, Leo Fisher, who has a few short comments for you. Leo?
Yes, I'm here.
Okay.
Welcome, everyone. You're breaking up a little bit, so.
Okay, thank you.
As I said, welcome, everyone. Thank you for attending. I thank Kathy for putting the programs together for us. And please look to the website for our future programs, including the webinar next week. So, Kathy, it's back to you.
Okay, thank you so much. At this point, I'd like to make sure everybody knows to use the Q&A tab or the chat function for any questions that you may have for our speaker for tonight. And now on to our presentation, because that's what we're all here for. Our speaker tonight is Jane Tierney, who actually I've known for probably about a year or so, and she's a fantastic speaker. She will be speaking on strategies for negotiation. One size does not fit all. A little bit about Jane. Jane founded her company, which is called Purple Link, in 2015, recognizing that there is a better way to obtain value and achieve results from thorough supply chains. Clients discover innovative ways to identify waste and risk that leak dollars from the supply chain and drain the bottom line. Through collaboration and stakeholders and suppliers, Purple Link's approach reduces both cost and risk, and clients sustain savings and improvements year over year. Jane has earned both an industrial engineering and MBA degrees. She is passionate about Lean and Six Sigma and is a certified green belt. And she also has her CPSM and her CPSD certifications. In addition to running her business, she teaches operations management and supply chain strategies at California State University, Northridge, and serves on the advisory board for the California State Long Beach Operations and Supply Chain Management Program. In 2020, she co-founded the Southern California SCRM Council for Local Executives focused on supply chain risk management. She is a sought-after speaker, author, and her first book is due out this year. At this time, I'd like to turn the program over to Jane.
Thank you, Kathy. Thanks for that great introduction, and thanks for the opportunity to meet with your team in Rochester. I'm in Los Angeles, so I love this virtual tool that we can have so I can be in Rochester with you and then be back in time for my class tonight. It's a crazy time, and if you told me a year ago when all of this coronavirus talk started that we'd still be dealing with this, I would have told you that you were crazy. But here we are, still very much in the midst of that. So we are dealing with it. I think we're all getting better and stronger because of it. But I'm here today to talk about negotiation. So I'm going to give you a small toolbox that you can use when you faced with a negotiation opportunity. I want to start off with a little cartoon here, a little bit of fun. So hopefully you can read that, but I think maybe some of you can relate to this, where you have someone in the room who says, let's get this started on the right foot, but I'm not going to give anything up right here. So then everybody in the room kind of takes a big deep breath and maybe lets out a sigh, because here we go again. I realize a lot of people don't like negotiations. And if you've encountered this guy in some of your negotiations, that can be why. Negotiations are a risk too. Sometimes it's too much risk for people. And when it's over, you're still left kind of with some uncertainty because you don't have all the information. So you walk away from the negotiation saying, did I really get a good deal? Should I have asked for more? Should I have really given that away? Did I get enough for it when I made that concession? Many of us walk away from a negotiation continuing to negotiate with ourselves on how good or how well we did with that, how good the outcome was. And we can talk ourselves into or out of feeling we got a good deal. I hope this sounds familiar to some of you. I've worked with non-supply chain people who say they're great at negotiations. Then they tell you the story of how they bought their car or maybe their home. I tell them it's not exactly the same as a negotiation with suppliers for multi-year contracts or negotiation with dual sources when you're trying to determine who's going to get 40%, who's going to get 60%, or some of the other negotiations that we do in the supply chain world, especially in the procurement world all the time. Great negotiators know that there's a lot of different circumstances and types of negotiation. When you buy a house or a car, it's pretty much a one and done scenario. You're not going back to that same person the next year or even 6 months later to buy another house or a car. And if you do buy a house from a construction company, maybe, and you go back, it's a completely different scenario because it's a completely different house many years later, typically. Same thing with a car. Each deal is in a single encounter with a person or a dealership. If it's unusual, if you go back to that dealership and get the same person, maybe you don't even go back to the same dealership. But when you're buying a car, it's something that can be purchased from any number of car dealers and salespeople. And today you can even get it online and bypass all of that. So when you have, it's a different scenario when you have the expectation that there's going to be another one after this, that you have the opportunity to continue the relationship, conduct another transaction with that same party, that same organization. In supply chain, it takes solid skills and planning and much more of an open mind than we see demonstrated in this cartoon. So I'm going to try to cover quite a bit today, and then I want to give away some prizes. So I'm going to talk about 5 different styles of negotiation. I'll talk about some approaches to negotiation, give you some strategies that help in different situations. Then I'm going to have a raffle and I'm going to give away some prizes. So because I have that, I want to make sure we stay connected, and I want to make sure that I am able to give away the prizes at the end. So if you're interested in being part of the raffle, send me an email right now. My email address is jane@purplelink, all one word, .co. There's no M. And just put in the subject line webinar. You don't have to put anything else in there, no other signature block or anything. As long as I have an email and the word webinar, I can sort through that, and we'll do that at the end. If you're not quite ready, that's fine. You're going to get another chance before I make the drawing at the end. So if you want to see if it's worth it, just stick around. So negotiation is a skill, and we're always negotiating in supply chain. Sometimes it's, excuse me, smaller negotiations that are almost clarifications or just polishing up a few things. Other times we have very formal negotiations. We meet in neutral locations. We have teams on both sides. There's formal offers. There's a lot of questions, discovery, counter offers, formal recess breaks where you go and do your little sidebar conversations and all those things. So there's lots of ways to do that. And then there's every instance in between. So some people I find are natural negotiators. I'll tell you what, I've got a 10-year-old neighbor who's a master negotiator when he's talking to his dad when he wants something. Others tend to shy away from it, and they view it more as a conflict rather than a discussion to find common ground, to reach an agreement so that you can get a contract in place. I'm not really a natural negotiator, and I don't necessarily relish the opportunity to negotiate as much as some of my colleagues. But through job requirements and a desire to improve, I've been able to become a pretty solid negotiator, and I've been able to hone these skills. My track record is very strong, with many significant wins for my company, and I also apply these skills in my personal life. I have learned that doing homework before beginning is important. It pays off. Ensuring that you've got a team of subject matter experts and you've got those on call, that really helps. If you can address the questions and you know who's supposed to talk and who's supposed to just be there for backup, that's an important thing too. And clear guidelines on what to do if things start to go a little sideways in that negotiation really help. So I negotiate as part of a team, but I also know when to make it private, more one-on-one type conversations, and when to have those and how to have those conversations. So with time and some of the tools I'm sharing today, you can be stronger and more successful negotiator. So I kind of like to have you turn on your cameras if you can, because I can't really do this any other way. I want to do a little bit of an informal poll. I'd like to know how many of you are like to negotiate, that's something that you find a fun activity or that you get jazzed about doing. Is it possible to see cameras if people, Kathy?
No, but what they could do is they could put something in the chat bar for you.
Okay, so put something in the chat. If you, I'll tell you what, I'll walk through these questions and then you can kind of tell me what things kind of resonate with you. So I'd like to know if you like to negotiate or if you prefer leaving that to somebody else. And I'd like to know if you have actual training, in formal training. Did you go to a class or a workshop or have something at your workplace to teach you to be a better negotiator or to teach you to negotiate in the beginning? And then if you actually prepare or if you just kind of wing it. So maybe you can answer these kind of short answers in the chat so I can take kind of an informal poll pretty quickly here. So we've got at least one who loves to negotiate. So I'm not getting a lot of responses in the chat. There we go. So we got some that like to and that have taken some courses. Some of you have taken training on that. So it's good. So you'll meet all kinds of different people. Some people really enjoy that negotiation thing. They look for that. And somebody says it all depends on the last if you wing it. So you'll find different people who think that they're really good, and maybe they are, and they don't have to prepare, but I think preparation helps. So yeah, thanks for all the comments there. A lot of people don't have any training and they just kind of learn on the job as they go. So what I want to emphasize is that negotiated outcomes, good negotiated outcomes, they aren't magical, and they aren't reached because one party is luckier than another. They're really the product of a combination of defining the outcome that you want, having a plan to achieve that, and then make sure that you understand the other side before you walk in the door. Do as much as you can to put yourself in their shoes, so to speak. Successful negotiating teams typically have a playbook, and they compile that collectively. They get together, they meet beforehand, and everyone understands what that playbook has. It's got different sections in that, including what is the best case scenario? What is the outcome that we would really like? This is not the blue sky perfect world version, because that's probably not going to happen. But what really is an optimal solution for your team or your company? They also need to agree on what the minimum elements are of an acceptable outcome. Maybe that you don't desire that and you hope that doesn't happen, but you need to know where that bottom threshold is. Then there's a spectrum on all of that, and you need some detail on that. So the way that you figure out how to get to yes, if you will, that you need to understand what the requirements are. So for example, receiving parts that meet spec, have acceptable quality levels, are packaged correctly, delivered, and are at a reasonable price. That's the kind of the bare minimum. Those are the requirements. You expect that of every supplier that you have. And if you only get the bare minimum, well, maybe that's okay. But if you can get more, then why not do that? So if preparing and listing all of the things that you want are going to help you get that. So if you put down the like to haves, and this would make it easier for us, things like more favorable payment terms, maybe the use of blanket orders so you can have a longer term order set up there. If you want flexibility, and many companies today want flexibility in the quantity and the delivery schedules, maybe you want things like tool maintenance thrown in, or you want some compensation for quality delivery issues should those arrive. You want that to be done automatically. You don't want to have to negotiate that every time. Maybe you want them to commit a certain amount of capacity to the products that your company requires. Or maybe you want them to dedicate resources on their team to help you make sure that you get the right kind of attention that you want as a customer. So if you have a list of these, it enables you as a negotiator to throw out all these add-ons to improve the outcome. And you've got a list and you know what to ask for. So you also need to know what isn't important, what you can offer in exchange for some need or want, or something that you might just be giving them a carrot to tell them, to show them that you really do want to make this deal, something to sweeten the pot. So you need to know what these are, but you also need to know the priority. So if you've got a list of wants, that's great, but what's the top want? Maybe example, it's you're really looking for favorable payment terms. Maybe you need, say, a 2% net 10, so that if you're the supplier, that's really important to you because you have cash flow problems. So then if you're the customer and you know that, then you can use that to maybe get something else that you need. If you the customer wants to go to net 45 and the supplier wants to go to 2% net 10, you have to figure out where you can meet on that. And maybe it's something that you can give because you want small, diverse businesses on your supplier, and then you've got some goals for that that would be helped if you add this supplier to the base. So that goal, that diverse business goal, may be more important than your goal for extending payment terms to net 45. So you can agree to the 2% net 10. That's going to help the supplier out, and it's going to help your goal with the small and diverse businesses. Might not help your goal for the extending payment terms, but you have to, again, prioritizing lets you know what you're going to ask for and what you're going to ask for first, and where you need to stand and where you need to give. And you want to be able to help your suppliers be successful. So if you know cash flow is an issue for them, be prepared to have something that is going to help them out. So it's very important that you know your side's position, but you also need to anticipate what the other side is going to ask for, how they're structuring their position and their strategy. You have to prepare for this, and that's trying to think like your opponent. And you want to create counterpoints and balances for their needs and wants against yours. Prioritizing as best you can helps create a lot of different options and possible packages that you can structure that lead to favorable outcomes for both parties. Sometimes a solution just can't be reached, and one party is not able to or chooses not to complete the negotiation. This is not asking for an adjournment or a recess or a regroup to strategize and reconvene at a later time when you say, we need to think about this, we'll get back to you. This is a situation where you can't see a path forward to an acceptable conclusion, something that is not obvious to either one or both parties. So before you begin the negotiation, you need to know where that line is. It's usually directly connected to the needs that you've defined. When you can't reach that agreement and you basically agree to disagree, you have to walk away. Before you reach that point, project and analyze the impacts, the costs, the disruptions that might be caused by that for both teams. My own personal philosophy is don't walk away without an option or an alternative to pursue. So if you're going to say no and walk, you better have something else in your hip pocket, because you don't want to be left with nothing. Taking a breather can be beneficial, giving both parties some time to come up with some options or consider different scenarios, or let the other party think about it, or let your own team think about it. But when you walk away and close that door can be difficult to reopen. So this is what we're trying to do with the negotiation. We're trying to hit the bullseye. We're trying to hit it with several different areas, the needs and the wants. And what happens sometimes is we're all over the map. So we want to try to get as close to the orange one as we can and avoid the one on the bottom. So I'm guessing that you're here today because this is an important topic to you and to your company. It is to many companies and their employers at this time and every time. So I'm going to go through this list of negotiation styles. These can be natural behaviors, or they can be strategic ploys that people use to achieve their desired outcomes. A lot of people have a preferred style that they default to when faced with an opportunity to negotiate, but that might not always lead to the satisfactory agreements. So here's a few common approaches. I'll talk a little bit about when that works and when that might not be the best choice. The first is avoidance. And at first you might say, well, if you're avoiding, then you're just not doing your job. Well, maybe. We all know people who are conflict avoiders and conflict averse, or people that are people pleasers, and they really want to give the other party what they want. They want to make everybody happy, but they're reluctant to challenge another's position or stick up for themselves sometimes when they should. So if this is your natural style, you may not be the best suited as the lead negotiator, but all of us can learn these behaviors and do better at this. But sometimes avoiding may be the best option when the issue is small, or it's going to sort it out itself when it's going to sort itself out in short order. For example, a supplier may want to work out a new delivery schedule for some prototype parts that they're building. They've had some problems and they're going to be late. So they're worried about that. They're not going to meet their commitment, and they call and they say, "We'd like to really sit down and figure out what we can do about this. How can we restructure this delivery schedule?" So you hear their request, but you know that the design team is having some problems of their own, and the schedule may slip, and it may slip. Maybe it's already slipped once and it's going to slip again. Or maybe they're looking at eliminating or completely redesigning the parts that the supplier is making. So the impact of them missing the delivery may in the end be nil. So you know you're going to pay for the parts because you've already agreed to pay the supplier for those parts, and they're working on them. So most of the materials been all of the materials been bought, and they've got labor into it. So you're prepared to pay the agreed upon price, really, no matter when they get delivered or what kind of condition it is. But you don't really want to get into the possible scenarios of the changes that may be coming from your side until you have more insight from the engineering team. So you kind of just avoid that negotiation, and you hope that over time you're going to figure it out. So you might just need another week, another 2 weeks. You know that the supplier is going to keep working on it, but you avoid that actual confrontation with that because it's not such a big deal. And it needs to be done when it's of low importance to both parties. When you've got somebody who's in a real bind, you don't want to avoid that because that just um, adds extra stress to both parties. The second way you can handle negotiations is to be accommodating, prioritizing the relationship over the outcome of the issue. When one party can readily make requested allowances, this saves a lot of time and effort for both parties, and you can preserve the relationship, which may really align with your longer term strategy. So if there are things you can easily give up, then be accommodating. If there are things that are going to be impactful to your company, not so great, then you don't want to be accommodating. But if you can, it works well. Competition is another type of style. Competition in negotiation really puts one side's needs ahead of everything else except the need to reach an agreement. So it's definitely a win-lose approach, a win-lose trade-off that you're looking for. Either I'm going to beat you or you're going to beat me. And oh, by the way, I'm not a good loser. So if you don't have a relationship with the other party and you don't require one in the future, you can go for it this way. You can be competitive. A good example is when you buy that car or a house that I spoke of. You're not really expecting to have to do that again, so you want to win this. But it can also apply to something like capital equipment that you buy something of. You're not going to necessarily buy more of that, so you can afford to be more competitive in your negotiation because you're not concerned about the relationship. If the other party isn't really happy at the end, you probably don't have to deal with any of those consequences or any aftermath from that. So you can go forward and you can be that way. The next way is compromising, and that's the give and take. This is how many people think of a negotiation. When you hear that word, a lot of people say, okay, I want this. So if you let me have that, then I'll give you something else. It's like kids playing Go Fish, asking for cards so they can win the game. Do you have any of this? Well, then I'm going to get rid of this card. So if you have the fives that I want, then I have to discard something else and maybe somebody else wants that. It's not really accommodating because it's not necessarily as easy to give, but it's not serious competition either. Agreements are reached fairly quickly when you can compromise. If both parties agree to this give a little to gain a little philosophy, it maintains your relationship because neither party really achieves their optimal solution, but you also don't try to take everything from the other party. You're giving a little and getting a little. You can both satisfy your needs and you're content with the outcome. That's a good way to go, at least until the next time you have to go back to them. So that one works, but not always the ideal. The final style is always my preferred style and recommendation for negotiations when you're looking at parties who have big things to negotiate, long-term relationships, a big interest in achieving a strong positive outcome. Parties have to be open about their needs and their wants, and you have to be very clear of that. So you have to have some trust and transparency because that needs to come out during the discussion and during the negotiation. And you're both really seeking that win-win solution. And this has to be a genuine seeking win-win, not I'm going to say that and then I'm going to come in and be competing and smash you to the ground. So it may take a little longer than a couple of the other methods, but the outcomes are worth it because both parties have met at least some, if not all, of their wants as well as their needs. It may take some innovation, a little creativity to construct final solutions, but it reinforces relationships and it benefits the bottom line for both organizations. So both parties are usually very willing to enter into more agreements together. And that's a highly prized situation for customers and suppliers in the world that we live in. So there's 5 styles, but these 4 approaches are a little different than that. They serve as reasons that drive you to enter into the negotiation in the first place. They kind of describe more what you're seeking as a final outcome. And I hope some of these look familiar. These are not styles of negotiating, but they're really analogous to those styles. And they really are aligned with the motivation for that discussion. They're really a pathway to get you to your desired income. So you can look at negotiation not just as a needed agreement, but as an opportunity for synergy. You want to create value for both organizations. You want to expand the opportunities that you both have. So this is a win-win scenario, but it's really about getting more out of this than you walked in there looking for. This isn't a good style for a one and done deal where you're just going to buy that house and never see those people again, or where one party has a lot more leverage than the other. But if you're truly seeking added value, this really works well when you're dealing with customers and suppliers that you plan to work with on an ongoing basis, or when you're working to finalize a long-term deal. If your desire is to drive to the lowest price, or a single thing that matters is like hitting a delivery date, then you need to push for that at all other costs. So if the biggest thing for you is to make sure that the supplier can be done by this date, then everything else pales in comparison. If that date is that important, then you might have to spend more money. You might have to do some other things to do that, but that date might be the one you need to meet. I use things like the Olympics as an example. We were supposed to have Olympics in Tokyo last year, and they had a start date for that. I think it was an August date. If you're providing a venue or any kind of service for the Olympics, you have to have it done by that date. If it's done 3 days later, it's too late. So anything else matters much less than the date. Other times it's the price, and you're guided by either your company or maybe it's a government thing where the price has to be the bottom line. If that's the most important thing, then what you're doing is pushing for whatever that bottom line element is. But oftentimes you may win the battle but lose the war. In the example of the date, you may hit your date, but you may pay twice as much for it. So depending on what your scenarios are and your requirements, you may get one of them and you may pay dearly on some other fronts. Oftentimes there's an opportunity to not only meet the needs of both parties, but to satisfy some of those wants. If, say, the price or the delivery is paramount, then this is a good style. But if you can still expand that goal to encompass the entire deal, then you move toward more of that first approach where you're really expanding the value and opportunities. So you may walk in thinking that this is a bottom line pursuit and I'm trying to get that. But if you listen and pay attention and look at what you can get, you may actually move that into a good direction and be able to expand the value for both parties. The third style is cooperation. And this really works well when parties have or perceive an imbalance. Like one company is really large, the other one is a small business. And it doesn't matter whether you're the supplier or the customer, one of you is very big and one of you is very tiny. So this means you want to look at all points of view and you want to demonstrate to the other party that you understand their position, but not at the same time, not acquiesce to all of their requests or to bend over. It's a softer view in negotiation, but if you temper this, this can lead to really good outcomes for both parties. If you're buying parts from a company that's been hit hard financially by the pandemic, you can really commiserate and share your personal and your company's experiences with the pandemic as well. I had an example one time where we needed parts from Intel. Intel is a huge company. I worked for a big company, but my division was very tiny and we didn't need very many parts. We at first, these parts were on allocation and we couldn't do anything. So we managed to find a old colleague of my boss who worked at Intel. We got hold of him. They went out to lunch and they had a nice conversation about what we were doing with our product, how much we needed, and where we'd initially been told that we couldn't even get in to deal with Intel direct. My boss worked his connections and he managed to get the number of parts we needed, which was very small. It was only a couple of thousand out of the millions they were making. And we were able to get that and actually get a good price for that as well because they had a great relationship. So this cooperation means looking at different things and how you can work together. And then finally, there's the approach that we hear from a lot of people, how they asserted their position and they won. So they beat the other party. In truth, this approach rarely leads to satisfying long-term outcomes. And if there was a relationship prior to the negotiation, it can deteriorate very rapidly after concluding the negotiation. Confidently, emphatically asserting your side's position is beneficial with strong opponents, but if it's overdone, you can miss a lot of opportunities, and it may require some damage control at the end. Watch out if you need to go back to the negotiating table with that company again. So if you've been listening, you should have heard three themes that are running through these, the styles and the approaches, three aspects that really help you achieve your goals, your desired outcome, and really help you tailor your style to get those. Not every style is good or bad. Not any style is actually good or bad at any particular time. But under certain circumstances, the wrong style or the wrong approach can lead to either great outcomes or to utter disasters. Consideration of the negotiation from the three viewpoints really leads you to pick the appropriate style and or approach. The first consideration is the impact of the agreement and the possible consequences from a poor agreement or no agreement. If you have a negotiation that you're doing that has significant value to your company through revenue, through higher dollar value that you're spending, maybe it's a big portion of your expected spend for the next year. If you're working with sole or even sometimes single suppliers where you might have some high switching costs, if you're dealing with negotiations that involve intellectual property, patents, trademarks, any of that kind of thing, either yours or the suppliers, then these kinds of elements make that a priority and make that very important to your company. In this case, you want to do your homework. You want to prepare, you want to do the analysis, document really clearly your needs and wants from the stakeholders so that you and your team know what you need and what you want. Generate some options, do some scenario planning, and look at possible and probable outcomes for you as well as your supplier, because it's important that you do this for yourself, but you also need to know what the supplier wants, and you have enough information to make your best guess. You may be wrong in some areas, but at least if you prepare, you start thinking that way. And if you find out that you thought price was more important to them than maybe the capacity that they were willing to allocate, you can shift gears in the negotiation, and you can always take a break and restructure that. But you want to review the importance of the outcome to your company. Then you want to look at the importance of the relationship, and you want to look at what is it now, what is it in the future, what do you need it to be. If you have the relationship now, is it strong? Is it positive? Is it contentious, maybe left over from the last time you did a negotiation? Or does it just need some work because it hasn't been really well managed or well tended? So what do you and your company need from this relationship now, in the next 6 months to a year, and maybe 3 to 5 years? Understand what that is and what that looks like. Know if there are substitutes readily available with low or maybe no switching cost in case this doesn't go well. Find out if you buy other parts from this supplier, maybe not your division, but maybe another division if you work for a big company, because you want to understand what that impact may be as a customer. Often suppliers see customers as Acme brand. So even if you 3 different divisions and operate pretty autonomously, the customer or the supplier may see you as a single customer. And if they have problems with one of you, they may have problems with all of you. So look at what else might be affected by the negotiation. If the relationship really isn't that important, if it has no consequences from that, then you're really free to use a lot more and different approaches that we've looked at. If you plan to purchase for parts from the supplier again in the short term or even in the longer term, the relationship may carry a lot more significance. So proceed with caution when you're looking at this situation. There's nothing worse than having an angry supplier or a really supplier who feels like they really got taken last time and they come back to the table the next time ready. They're prepared. They feel like they got cheated last time and they're not going to do that this time. That second round is not nearly very much, is never very much fun to go through. And finally, you need to consider how quickly you need to conclude the negotiation. If time is of the essence, your approach is going to be more direct, more targeted, and you might utilize more compromise cooperation type things. If time's not an immediate constraint, then consider more collaborative and cooperative type situations and pursue maybe the added value outcome if your relationship will support that approach going forward. So the 2 axes here, the relationship and the outcome. If the relationship is of low value, then you want to consider the significance of the outcome. If there's not much writing on that, then avoidance may be best. You might want to delegate this issue to the lowest level for resolution and just see how it goes. If the outcome is more important, you have to say, does it apply to both parties? Do both parties view this outcome as having significance? If it's not that important to you or your company, you might consider accommodating. So it might be way more important to the other party than it is to you. And if you can accommodate the request and be done with it, then that's a good thing. If it helps build or reinforce the relationships, then you still can try to be accommodating if you can. And if the relationship value is low and the outcome is crucial, you can be in a competitive position, which requires more strategies and planning than either avoiding or accommodating. If you have this mutual need to reach an agreement with neither party really wanting to walk away or let the other party walk, it may evolve to more of a compromise situation, where compromise can be a good solution with moderate emphasis on the relationship and still help you quickly achieve the solution. It may not be ideal, but it's less contentious and it has less risk than with the pure competition where one party may be pounded by the other. So you have to figure that time factor in there too. Competition can be quick if you really want to do that, but the risk is higher with losing. And then finally, collaboration. If you have a situation where the relationship and the outcome both have significance to both parties, and you need an agreement really quickly, you can seek to collaborate and try to maximum the outcome. If you need the outcome very quickly, you might backslide into the compromise area. But if you have ample time, then go to the collaboration style. In competitive negotiations, the bottom line is prioritized for one party, or one party has decided they're going to win and beat the other person. If both parties want to win at any cost, the relationship, if there was one in the first place, is often torched. If there's no follow on relationship desired or expected, then again, feel free to go all out to win. This also applies if the outcome sought is heavily focused on price or a primary need with few wants. When relationships are important or going to be needed in the future, then you're going to want to do more cooperation or collaboration. So competition is good when you have the victory is mine and you're really focused on the bottom line. That's the way to go. Cooperation fits in kind of between the compromise and the collaboration, and then the collaboration and expanding the value are very tightly aligned. So it's subtle differences between the approach and the style, but they do complement each other and they can work well. So what I know for sure is there's a better way to negotiate than pounding fists on tables, walking out and leaving the other side just to stew for an hour or so in a conference room, or a few other techniques I've seen that quite honestly floored me. I'm sure some of you have some pretty good stories to tell about poor negotiations, tactics, and strategies as well. But in supply chain, and in particular in procurement, negotiation skills are mandatory. We're always working with suppliers to polish a deal, to improve the conditions for our employers. We're expected to achieve great outcomes, which is difficult to do. And if you expect to achieve ideal outcomes every time, it's not really very realistic. So don't set yourself up for a lot of disappointment. Do prepare for a variety of outcomes and know your own priority and pain points ahead of time so that you don't get your organization into a situation that is going to be painful for the next couple of years until you can renegotiate. And as I've stated before, no single style or approach is good for every situation, but every situation can be analyzed and appropriate goals and strategies designed that will help you achieve those outcomes that you desire. Know your own go-to style, and if possible, have a variety of styles on your team so that you can complement and balance them. Sometimes when you get stressed, you default to whatever your go-to style is. Understand what that is and think about whether that's appropriate or not. I've been in meetings with people in negotiations where people are really more of that competitive style, and something starts to go wrong and you see them start to get in that way, and you have to kind of pull them back because this really wasn't supposed to be a competition where we're trying to pound them. We're really trying to get a mutual agreement here. We're trying to do this win-win, collaborate, but somebody gets a little stressed because something doesn't go quite the way they thought it might. Doesn't even mean it's going wrong. It's just a little different, and they go default to their go-to style, which is the competition and I'm going to win. So outline your desired outcome. Choose the style that you think is going to achieve your goals the best. If it's not natural for you, practice. Make notes of things to say or maybe not to say so that you can handle that discussion and without a lot of surprises. Don't be reluctant to ask for a recess during the negotiation. If you need to regroup, rethink, revise your plan before you go to the next level or whatever, it's perfectly fine to do that. If you use those three aspects of the outcome, the importance of the outcome, the relationship value, and the time, then that will help you prepare for success and know whether you can really walk away or not if you can't reach a mutually satisfying agreement. I never threaten to walk away unless I'm fully prepared to leave empty-handed. That means I've got another plan B somewhere down the road. I don't walk out and say, what am I going to do now? But if I get to that point, then if I want to be prepared, because once you say no, thank you, goodbye, it might be extremely difficult or painful to open that negotiation back up. I'll give you an example. I worked for a company that had a really difficult supplier, and my employer basically just wanted to kick them to the curb. But the supplier designed and produced a product that complemented other products we produce, and one that was really popular with our customers. So internally, we decided to design our own version of this product. It was no easy task because there were patents and IP that the supplier held, and we couldn't touch that. So we had to have a different approach to the design to avoid all of that infringement. We eventually, our engineering team worked out a suitable design and product. And after a particularly contentious discussion and negotiation, my company walked away from that. We said, okay, we're done. We've got our own. We're going to take it from here. So never mind. It was left pretty much on a sour note. But lo and behold, after a few months, we discovered that our design wasn't backwards compatible with all of our customer systems. And after a lot of frustration and teeth gnashing, we had to go back to that supplier to tell them we needed more of that product to satisfy our customers. They were really gracious enough to eventually accept our orders, but only after they significantly hiked the prices and they insisted on minimum order quantities. It was not a really good deal for us at that point, and I gotta say, that still hurts. So be prepared. So now I've given you some basics, and I realize that negotiation is complicated and complex, and all negotiations are unique and take their own amount of uh, take on their own life. So if you're like me, you go to webinars like this and you get inspired, you see some new ideas and you see some things, oh, I could try that. But you get back into your office mode, if not really your actual office, because many of us are working remotely today, and you forget, you get distracted, and you don't really know how to implement that. You didn't really catch that. It sounded good in the webinar, but you can't really remember. And so you get frustrated with that. So I want you to think about your company, your upcoming negotiations, your support system. Who do you have in your corner to assist with implementing some or all of these tools and techniques in your workplace? If you could use some outside support, I invite you to consider working with me. If you're impatient to get started and would like to do this, if you have an upcoming negotiation you'd like some help with, then you should give me a call. You can schedule a call with me at callwithjane.com to explore working together and see if I can help your company. This call is complimentary. It's available for people who need and want more assistance implementing some of these tools and techniques quickly so that they can get the results they need on their next opportunity. It's really simple to get this free call. Go callwithjane.com, pick a time zone and pick a meeting time, and you're all set. If you're thinking that sounds really good, maybe I'll do that later or tomorrow, that you've got cocktails and dinner calling your name there in Rochester, I'm going to give you an incentive to do it right now, or at least before the sun sets tomorrow. If you book a call with me today or tomorrow, by the end of the day tomorrow, you're going to get a couple of gifts. You'll get the slide from this presentation, and you'll get a 3-month subscription to my dynamic dialogue webinars. They're free, but you get a subscription, so you get fewer emails. It's great to receive free stuff, isn't it? But you have to book the call by the end of the day tomorrow. It's very simple, callwithjane.com. So now it's time for some prizes. If you didn't already, I'm going to ask you to send me an email to jane@purplelink.co with the webinar in the subject line. And I'm going to draw one of those names really quick. So if you send me an email, I'll send you the slides. I have no other way to get you the slides unless you send me an email. So you can do that. If you are the chosen winner tonight, you're going to get the slides. You're going to get a book that I think is really, really interesting called Radical Candor, and you'll get a dynamic dialogue subscription. So I'll give you about 30 more seconds to send in your webinar, send in your email to jane@purplelink.co, and then I will pick the winner. So let's see. Okay. Here we go. My little random number generator, and Wanda Humphrey, you are the winner. So Wanda, are you there? I hope. If so, you need to send me another email with an address where I can send your book. So I'll have the book shipped out. Hopefully by the end of the day tomorrow, the book will be on its way to you. But if we have some more events and workshops and trainings on our website, purplelink.co. And I want to let you know, because you're all ISM members or you're all affiliated with ISM, being ISM Rochester, I'm doing a CPSM series of training. I have a CPSM, I have a CPSD, and I'm also a certified trainer for CPSM and CPSD. And I'm going to start a class in March that's going to address exam 2. So if you'd like to get your certification this year and you're thinking you might like some help in taking that, there's 3 tests to take. You can take them in any order. I happen to be planning on exam 2 starting in March. It lasts about 12 weeks, and then you'll be ready to take the test. So I'm going to leave you with one final slide. I'm a big fan of Albert Einstein, and Albert says that sometimes one pays most for the things one gets for nothing. And when you're negotiating, I think that's a great thing to keep in mind. What can I get for nothing? What can I give away for nothing? And how can I make this work for me during this negotiation so that we can get the most for ourselves and for our company out of this negotiation? So with that, I will take questions. Any comments, questions that you might have?
I don't see any questions just yet. You know, I do have a question for you, though. Just something I was wondering, since COVID, how has negotiations changed?
Well, they're virtual now. So, you know, I worked in some defense companies, contractors, and in some cases we went to elaborate lengths to get a neutral site where we could get some parts and not come to my place, or we'll go to your place. Other times I did that. If you could negotiate in person, that was always preferable, but now it's really on on Zoom. So that makes it a little easier, a little more difficult. I haven't done a lot of serious negotiations via Zoom, but it changes the dynamic quite a bit. But we still have work to do, right? So you have to adapt and adjust, and the preparation still is very important to do that.
Okay, yeah, I was just actually very, very curious about it. That's all. Okay, thanks so much. I don't actually see any questions in the Q&A or the chat. If anybody does have a question, just make sure you just stick it in there, and then Jane will answer it. In the meantime, I would like to take the opportunity now to thank you, Jane, for this very informative presentation. I want to let everybody know I will be sending out a copy of the recording along with your continuing education for tonight's program. I also want to let you know that next week we will be featuring February 17th. We will be hosting another webinar at 5 p.m. Eastern Time. It's going to be on sourcing for logistics services, insights from the Logistics Manager Index, with featured speaker Stephen Carnival. He's actually the assistant professor of supply chain management at RIT, Sanders College of Business. And along with them is going to be Zach Rogers, who's also an assistant professor of supply chain management, but he's at Colorado State University. So please be sure to register for this particular program. And then again, Jane will be returning back to us in March, on March 17th, and she's going to be doing a webinar just on the CPSM certification. So Jane, did you have any last minute comments before we end?
No, I do other workshops, and the call with Jane is a great opportunity to talk about not only negotiation, but any other supply chain issues or challenges you may be facing that Purple Link may be able to help you with.
Okay, thank you so much. And thanks everybody for joining us. I hope everybody has a terrific evening, and we'll see you next week.